All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as we go through some of the position battles that the Niners will have to debate between as they get closer to the cut down date on the 26th of August. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in the country, the best barbecue in the world. Check them out. They're in Corte Madera. They're in Emeryville. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. And also, we're brought to you by Claw Daddy Arcades. They're a great follow on Instagram at Claw_Daddy_Arcades for a location near you. When you stop by, tell them the Krug sent you. Big thanks to Claw Daddy. He's got brand new locations opening in Capitola Mall and Visalia Mall later on this year. So, Claw Daddy Arcades, a fantastic sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, let's get into it right here. 49ers, the cut down date is looming. That's right. 2 preseason games in the books. That means the Niners only have 2 practice days and then 1 more preseason game. And then on the 26th of August, a week from tomorrow, they will cut this roster down from their camp limit of 90 to 53. They used to go from 90 to 75 to 53, but now there's just all one cut at the end. So every team in the NFL at 1 o'clock Pacific on the 26th of August has to be at the 53-man roster, limit. And then after that, a day or two after that, each team will assign, I believe, 16 roster spots for the practice squad. So 16 spots, I believe this year is 16. It's gone from, 4-man taxi squads to 6 to 8 to 10. Now it's up, I think, at 16. But the Niners will re-sign some of the players that they do cut and re-sign them to their practice squad. And used to be the practice squad was an area for just young players, first or second year players for the most part. But they've changed it. They've kind of made it now a practice squad / taxi squad, and you can put veterans on there. So the Niners have had Willie Snead on there in the past, and I'm sure they'll throw some veterans on there as well that are going to practice with the team, prepare like they're going to play in the games, and just not going to play in the games until they get activated off the practice squad. And I believe you got 2 guys each week that you can call off the practice squad. So let's get into it. Let's get into the roster mechanics. And because of all the injuries, it's made this a little bit more complicated than it has been in the past. But we'll go through every position and tell you what we see, what the Niners are likely to do, and what we would do. Because, what the Niners, we can guess along with the Niners, but a lot of it's futile because they may love a player in another camp that we have no knowledge of, right? Because it never became public. Their interest on this player never became public. So there could be a player that they have their eye on in another camp. Now, in past years, Shanahan and Lynch have kind of taken this approach of like, hey, look, we're going to take a look at everybody in this camp. We're not too worried about looking around the league because we have one of the deepest rosters in football. And, chances are if you can't make Carolina's roster, you can't make ours. If you can't make Pittsburgh's roster, you can't make ours. If you can't make Tampa's roster, you can't make ours. Well, those days have changed. Times have changed. And now I think the 49ers have to take kind of a little bit more of cast a wider net when they're looking to put together their roster and as far as what players are out there that could help them at positions, on either side of the ball or special teams. It's possible that, that Tampa may have a better roster than the Niners, or the Falcons may have a better roster than the Niners, or any team in pro football at a particular position could have a better roster than the 49ers. All right, let's roll down through this thing and we'll see if we can get as close as we can to 53 and make some sense of it. All right, at quarterback, I think everything's real easy. Brock's your 1, Mac's your 2. They're going to go with just 2. Curtis Rourke is going to start the year on the non-football injury list, the NFI. And then Carter Bradley is going to be waived. Most likely Carter Bradley's not going to be picked up. And then he's going to be re-signed to the practice squad. So you're going to have what I think is a very good quarterback room. Purdy as your one, Jones is a totally proven number two, and then Bradley, who's got as good an arm as almost anybody in pro football, as your practice squad guy. And then you're developing Rourke long term. You're letting him, have that redshirt year because he tore his ACL, and now he'll get a whole year to rehab it and learn the system. And that's really exciting for the Niners because they're going to show up next spring with a quarterback room that now includes Curtis Rourke, who's a pretty good player, 6'6", led Indiana to the college football playoff. So at quarterback, it's real simple. They're going with two, Bradley to the practice squad, Rourke to the NFI. There you go. Easy, easy, easy. All right, let's move to running back because suddenly it went from easy, easy, easy to almost, oh my God, how do we pare this thing down? All right, so I have the 49ers going with 5 running backs. There's only really 3 that are automatics, right? Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Guerendo, if the shoulder checks out, and I think it will, and Kyle Juszczyk. Those are the 1, 2, 3 in whatever order. Obviously, CMC and Juice are the starters. Guerendo's the third guy. So now you got 2 more spots. And what makes this complicated is that Jordan James has got broken fingers, and now Corey Kiner's got a high ankle sprain. And then you've got Keyshawn Vaughn, who you just signed. You got Patrick Taylor, who's a special teamer. And you have Jeff Wilson, who you just signed. So, you have a bunch of options here at running back. Exactly how are the 49ers going to pare this thing down? How are they going to do this exactly? Well, I would say the question for this one is who is RB4 and who is RB5? I would go with Corey Kiner and Jordan James and cut Patrick Taylor, Keyshawn Vaughn, and Jeff Wilson. Why? Because if you cut Corey Kiner and Jordan James, they're going to get picked off the waiver wire because they're rookie running backs who have looked good. And then Taylor is been out there for a number of years. Anybody could have had him. Keyshawn Vaughn was on the street. Jeff Wilson was on the street. These guys were out there for anybody to have. So I would say it's real simple. Go with Juice and CMC and Guerendo, and then go with Kiner and Jordan James. 5 backs. There you go. Well, what if either James or Kiner has to start the year on some kind of an injured list, a PUP or an injured list of some kind? It's possible that you could then be in the market for one more back. Personally, I would look outside at the outside options. Let me throw out 3 or 4 outside options that I think could be really more better options than Keyshawn Vaughn, Jeff Wilson, or Patrick Taylor. Amani Bailey, fast little back from TCU, was in Kansas City for a while on their practice squad. He was in Carolina this summer on their team. It doesn't look like Bailey's going to make their team. He's explosive. He's an explosive runner. Very, very fast. And he's small, but he's explosive, as I said, and he's got a lot of talent. So do you go with a guy like Amani Bailey? He's out there. He potentially will be out there. We don't know who's out there yet. Looking at Kansas City's roster projection, it looks like there's a very good chance that they're going to wind up cutting Elijah Mitchell. Now, I think that's a no-brainer for the Niners, especially as much as Kyle Shanahan loves Elijah Mitchell. So maybe if you had to put Kiner or James on an injured list to start the year, maybe you could sign a guy like Elijah Mitchell back. We know how much Shanahan loved Elijah Mitchell, hated to see him go. He left in free agency, and now he's not even going to make the Chiefs roster. So he's out there. That's an interesting name. Another interesting name is a guy the Niners met with before the draft in Philadelphia, Shunderick Powell, who played at Central Arkansas. He's very fast, very explosive. This guy is really, really fun to watch. He's probably a little bit of a special teamer, a little bit of a return man, so he would help you on special teams. He's a dynamic mover. Like Bailey, he's dynamic. If you're looking at Jeff Wilson and Keyshawn Vaughn and Patrick Taylor went for 1.5 a carry against Denver. He went for minus 1.5 a carry against the Raiders. He runs totally upright. I don't think he's much of a player from scrimmage. As a special teamer, he's a good player. But from scrimmage, not so much. And I would be definitely looking to see what else is out there over Patrick Taylor. So I threw out Amani Bailey. I threw out Shunderick Powell. I threw out Elijah Mitchell. Here's one more name for you. How about this one? How about Frank Gore Jr.? Frank Gore Jr. has had a really good preseason with the Buffalo Bills, and he is not going to make the roster. They have Cook, they have Ray Davis, they have other guys, and Gore Jr. is not going to make it. But he had a game the other day where he averaged over 6.5 yards a carry as a runner and caught like 3 or 4 balls out of the backfield. He reminds me an awful lot of Frank. Now, he's a poor man's Frank. He's not Frank. But this guy's not a bum either. I mean, Frank Gore Jr.'s got talent. He absolutely has talent. And he would be a very nice practice squad back for the 49ers if they wanted to, if he gets cut by Buffalo and decides he wants to change the scenery, if the Niners decide they want him but don't want to put him on the active roster, possibly with Frank Gore, his Frank Gore Jr.'s dad being Frank Gore Sr. and part of the Niner organization, could Frank Gore Sr. get Frank Gore Jr. to sign with the Niners? I think it would be smart. I know a lot of people would say, well, maybe Frank Gore Jr. wants to cut his own path. Heck with that. He should be born a Niner. And I'm not talking about, he's not a star, but if you decided to go with Kiner and James and you wanted a practice squad back, any of those 4 guys, Amani Bailey, Frank Gore Jr., Elijah Mitchell, Shunderick Powell, they would all be nice. I'm sure Philly, Kansas City, Buffalo, Carolina, they're going to try to squeeze those guys onto their practice squad. So the way the rules are written, you can't take a guy from Philly's practice squad and just put him on your practice squad. That's a lateral move. If you're taking him off of Philly's practice squad, you have to put him on your active roster. So that's something, if the Niners do have an injury early on and they start with Kiner or James out, maybe they could give a roster spot to an Elijah Mitchell. Maybe they could give a roster spot to a Frank Gore Jr. But both those guys would be guys that I would absolutely have conversations about before I decided to round out my roster. Now, I'd be fine if they went with Jeff Wilson Jr., who I thought looked pretty good in the Raider game the other day. And Jeff Wilson is a tough guy. He knows the system. He might be a real good fit. So it's really between, McCaffrey, Garendo, and Juice. Their spots are locked up. And that 4th and 5th running back spot could go to Jordan James and Corey Kiner. Probably should. If one of them's hurt, it would be very easy to just say, hey, we'll go with Jeff Wilson or Patrick Taylor or Keyshawn Vaughn. They're here. But as I said, Elijah Mitchell is out there potentially. He could be cut at the deadline. And Frank Gore Jr. is out there potentially. So if Jordan James or Corey Kiner have to start on an injured list and the Niners want to start with 5 backs, I'd go with one of those guys. Go with Gore Jr., go with Elijah Mitchell over Patrick Taylor, over Jeff Wilson, over Keyshawn Vaughn. They're younger, healthier, faster, more dynamic, more of a future than Wilson, Taylor, and Vaughn. So that's what I would be doing. Because let's look at things realistically. If you lose Juice, who's your every down back? Garendo's probably not an every down back. And then you're like, okay, well, is Patrick Taylor an every down back? No, he's a special teamer. Is Jeff Wilson at this point an every down back? Maybe, but he's not a dynamic one. Is Keyshawn Vaughn an every down back at this point? No. If he is, he's not dynamic. But if you could add a Gore, Gore Jr., if you could add an Elijah Mitchell, you might be able to go for 3 weeks with Elijah Mitchell and what you got as the backup. So just some names there: Elijah Mitchell, Frank Gore Jr. over, Wilson, Taylor, and Vaughn. But if it was up to me, I'd go with Jerome James and Corey Kiner as RB4 and RB5. All right, let's move to tight end. In the past, the Niners have gone with 4 tight ends, and they have 4 on the roster right now. So some people would just say, hey, they're going to go with what they got: Kittle, Farrell, Tongas, and Willis. But I just don't think Tongas or Willis is probably going to get claimed by other teams. I think they're going to slip through waivers. And if they don't, you got Ross Dwelly out there who you could also bring back to the practice squad. I think I would go with 2. Go with Kittle, go with Farrell. You have Juice, you have Garendo. They could man those roles if they had to in a pinch. If I had to go with Willis or Tongas, I probably would go with Tongas after his blocking effort as a fullback and as a tight end in this last game. I think he's shown a little bit more than Willis. But in reality, I would cut them both. and put one of them on the practice squad, if not both. If neither gets claimed on waivers, then Willis and Tongas go to the practice squad, and you got a couple tight ends there that you could go to. But I think I would go with 2 to start, Kittle and Farrell. So let's move to wide receiver, because this is a really tough spot. And I'm not exactly sure how this is going to shake out. But the question is, who's wide receiver 6? That is the ultimate question here, because you've got, just looking at the receivers. So Ayuk is going to start the year on the PUP. So he's going to miss the first 4 games for sure. Then you have Jennings, who has either a contract hold in, or a hurt calf. But either way, he hasn't practiced in a while. So I would expect he's probably going to come back and play. So that's 1. Pearsall's 2, right? Watkins had a high ankle sprain. Is he going to be back in time? If so, he's number 3. Demarcus Robinson doesn't count because he's suspended probably for the first 3 games. So he doesn't count, and neither does Ayuk. So you got Jennings, you got Pearsall, you got Watkins, those 3. And then it starts to get a little dicey. I mean, it starts to you start to say, okay, well, what exactly are we looking for here? I think you're probably looking for wide receiver 6. Just who is, I'm going with 6 wide receivers, and who is the 6th wide receiver? So Jennings is 1, Pearsall's 2, Watkins is 3. You've got Gage probably 4, and Cowing 5 potentially, but you also have Robbie Chosen. You have Junior Bergen. You have Isaiah Hodgins. So it's a wide open situation at wide receiver. To me, it comes down to Jacob Cowing or Robbie Chosen, Junior Bergen, or Isaiah Hodgins for that 6 wide receiver spot, or guys on the outside. And this is where, I think there's a very good chance Romeo Doubs gets traded by Green Bay. If I were the Niners, I would go knock on Green Bay's door for Romeo Doubs. Okay. So, because that, to me, he would be he's a free agent at the end of the year. But I think he could really establish himself as a key figure here in San Francisco. So I think Romeo Doubs, I would definitely call Green Bay and see what it would take to get Romeo Doubs. But then I'm looking at this list. Junior Bergen, to me, is not very dynamic. He's a special teams guy and really just more of a punt return guy because he's not much of a kick returner. Hodgins is a possession receiver, kind of slow, not going to be claimed by anybody else. He'll go through to the practice squad for sure. Gage, probably the same. There might be a team out there that would sign Gage, but I think he'll probably slip through to the practice squad if he doesn't make it. So I think it really comes down to Jacob Cowing, who was your 4th round pick last year, who runs in the 4.3s, or Robbie Chosen, who is a veteran who also once upon a time ran in the 4.3s and is coming off a near 100-yard performance against the Raiders in preseason game number 2. So do you go with Cowing or do you go with Chosen, or do you look outside? Now, what receivers are out there? Well, Romeo Doubs, as I said, could be available. But there are guys that I think might be better than Cowing and Chosen and Hodgins and Bergen. Who are they? So let's talk about them for a second. The Rams have a receiver named Mario Williams, who was really good in college at SC and Tulane. The guy scores touchdowns. Scored like 17 touchdowns in college. Sure enough, what did he do the other day? He caught a 38-yard touchdown from Stetson Bennett in the Rams preseason game. 38-yard touchdown where he got deep down the middle, and Bennett hit him in stride. Mario Williams is dynamic. He's dynamic. He may not run the same 40 time as Jacob Cowing, but man, he's a little bit more substantial physically, and he can get deep, and he's proven it. He looks good. He looks really good. Last year, the Rams took Cody Schrader away from the Niners. How about taking Mario Williams away from the Rams? The roster projections with the Rams say he's not going to make the team. Mario Williams is a guy I would definitely look at. Giles Jackson, who went to Freedom High School in Antioch, was at the Niners local pro day. The Eagles just picked up John Mechie And by the way, the Niners went after John Mechie and just got outbid by the Eagles. So it's a pretty clear indication that the Niners don't feel like they have the right combination of receivers or that they need more. They feel like they need more. So if you're trying to trade for John Mechie, maybe you should try to trade for Romeo Doubs. But Giles Jackson is an interesting guy because he's a small little slot receiver who did nothing but produce for the UW Huskies. He's got caught up in a numbers game in Philly. Derek Young, big physical wide receiver from Lenore Ryan, who's been in Seattle's camp the last few years. Probably going to wind up cut, but he's a big receiver, 6'3", 220, and he's got good explosiveness, good size. A developmental receiver for sure, but an intriguing one. Then there's the Jets, who, according to reports, are going to probably wind up cutting Malachi Corley, who is very much a Deebo Samuel clone and could do a lot of the same things that Deebo did. Pittsburgh's going to wind up cutting Rock Taylor, the rookie from Memphis. Rock Taylor has had a good camp. He's had a good preseason. The Falcons may cut the San Jose State star, Nick Nash. The Chargers, they say, may cut Jerry Rice's kid, Brendan Rice. These are all pretty intriguing guys. But the guy who, to me, makes the most sense is Elijah Badger. He's going to get cut by Kansas City. I think Elijah Badger is probably a better option for the 49ers for this 6 wide receiver spot than Robbie Chosen, Junior Bergen, Isaiah Hodgins, or Jacob Cowing. And, you say, why? Why this guy? Well, first of all, there's a lot of traits to like. 6'1", 200 pounds, 4.43 speed. He's not as fast as Cowing, but he's played the slot. He's played the X. He's played the Y. He's very versatile. He only had 2 drop passes his final 2 years of college. This guy probably has a relationship with Ricky Pearsall because he basically did the same Ricky Pearsall deal. He started at ASU. He was a return man at ASU. Then he went to Florida, and they used him on verticals. So just like Ricky, who played at ASU in Florida, Elijah Badger played at ASU in Florida. Then he had 2 catches for 18 yards in the first preseason game for Kansas City. They didn't play him in the second game to try to stash him, to try to hide him and slip him through to the practice squad. Brett Veach has been known to do this. But this is a good receiver. And this he's a Sacramento kid. He went to Folsom High School. He's really tough. He's versatile. He needs refinement. He's a young receiver, but man, he's got some size. He's got some speed. He's got some big playability. I like Elijah Badger quite a bit. In fact, to me, if you're going to have, a 6th wide receiver, that 6th wide receiver better be able to play all the spots. And Cowing, I don't think can, but Badger can. Badger can play inside. Badger can play outside. And the fact that he's got really good ball skills, big hands, good speed. I think I'd rather have Romeo Doubs, but Romeo Doubs going to cost you your 2026 third-round pick. So you're really looking at this other group. The other guy I didn't mention yet is Laviska Shenault, who, has got some running back size. He's in Buffalo. He's not going to make Buffalo's roster. In a lot of ways, he's kind of like a Deebo. So if you want that Deebo character, Laviska Shenault, Malachi Corley, Rock Taylor, those guys really fit the bill. If you're looking for, more of a speedster, then, a guy like Giles Jackson makes a lot of sense. I think Doubs would be a great guy to trade for because I think he would be a significant player for the 49ers, and they have a very young receiving core. But if you could get Elijah Badger, I think I would, that's the guy I would go for. That's the guy I'd go for just because of the versatility and the upside. I think Badger's got a little bit more upside. I don't know the Cowing is ever going to be physical enough to be durable enough to really get his career going. I like Cowing. I like his strength. I like his improved strength. I like his explosive 4.3 speed. I just don't know if now that you got Jordan Watkins, I don't know that you need Cowing more as much as you need a versatile receiver that can play all the spots. And that's what Badger can do. So if it was me, I would cut Chosen, Hodgins, Bergen, Cowing, and try to pick up Elijah Badger off waivers from Kansas City. Or if I could trade for Romeo Doubs, I'd trade for Romeo Doubs. I think that 6 receiver kind of is important. All right. How about tight end 3? Well, as I said, I think it's going to go Kittle and Farrell. And I think tight end 3 is between Tongas and Willis. I'd go with Tongas, but either way, I think they're both cut and headed to the practice squad. Now, there's another intriguing outside candidate as well here. Tanner Connor from Miami has had a nice summer for sure. But once again, the only way you can get a guy like that who gets cut in Miami and is probably going to be headed to their practice squad is if you put him on your active roster. So he'd have to be better in your mind than Tongas or Willis. And there's just so much of a learning curve at tight end, all the shifts and motions. By the time Tanner Connor was up to speed, you'd be in week 5. So I think probably the smart play at tight end is just go with Kittle and Farrell and put Tongas and or Willis on the practice squad. And if you put Tongas and Willis through the waiver wire and they get claimed, then re-sign Ross Dwelley. Put him on the practice squad. I think physically Dwelley's pretty much cooked. But you know what? If it's just a practice squad role and a part-time role, maybe he could do it. All right. So we're kind of getting through this a little bit, piece by piece, position by position. Let's get into the rest of it as far as how this thing is going to shake out. So we talked about it. You're looking for running back 4 or 5. You're looking for wide receiver 6. You're looking for probably a practice squad tight end. For the offensive line, let's move to the offensive line because this, to me, is a really interesting spot for the 49ers. What do they do along the offensive line? I think you go with 9. So you go with your 5 starters and you go with 4 backups. And to me, 8 of the 9 spots are taken. Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dom Pooney, Colton McKivitz. Those are your 5 starters. Your best tackle, number 2 tackle, after watching the replay of this last game, is probably Austin Pleasance. So that's he's number 6. Connor Colby has had a nice little summer. He's going to be number 7. Matt Hennessy is an NFL starter at center, masquerading as a backup. So he's going to make the team. That's 8. So who's the 9th O lineman? That's the question. And these are the options. You can go with Drew Moss from Colorado State, the rookie, who looks like he could be a future starter at center. You go with Spencer Burford as the 9th offensive lineman. He can play guard. He can play tackle. But can he play either is the question. You could go with Nick Zakelj, who's also your 3rd-string center, and Brock Purdy's good buddy and a guy that they really, really like, and it's obvious that they're trying to get Zakelj on the roster. You can go with Isaiah Prince, who had a couple false starts in this last game, but does have 36-inch arms and a prototypical tackle build. You could go with Drake Nugent, who had one of the better preseason games. I think he had no pressures allowed and like 20-plus pass blocking snaps. And then, of course, there's the international Isaac Alarcon, and Alarcon won't be getting the spot. So, who do you want out of those guys for your 9th spot? Moss, Burford, Zakelj, Prince, Nugent, and Alarcon. I would probably go with Nugent, but you're so deep at center with Hennessy and obviously you've got Brendel and supposedly Pooney can play there, McKivitz can play there. I mean, there's other guys that can play there. Zakelj. So it's like, do you go with Nugent? Well, he might look the best. Do you go with an extra tackle? And if so, who do you like more between Burford and Prince? Do you go with kind of a jack of all trades? If it was up to me, I probably would wind up going with either Drake Nugent or Drew Moss, because I think they have starter potential in the interior, where Prince, Zakelj, and Burford don't have starter potential, in my opinion. So I would probably go with Nugent or Moss as the 9th offensive lineman. But I think the Niners will probably go with Zakelj. And I think, Burford, I'm not sure about Burford, but, they have Burford as their number 2 left tackle. A lot of people feel like Burford automatically is going to make the team. To me, it's Burford or Pleasance, but not both. And I think Pleasance, he's a little bit bigger body, a little bit more of I see a little bit more improvement in him. To me, he's a little bit more of a tackle as far as stature and foot speed. He doesn't have great foot speed by any stretch, but he's a developmental type player. So, yeah, I mean, it's either Pleasance or Burford. Definitely Colby, probably Hennessy over Nugent, And so then it comes down to the final spot. Moss, Burford, Zakel, Prince, Nugent, or Alarcon. I think the Niners are going Zakel. I think they're going to keep Zakel. I think their backup O-linemen are going to be Pleasance, Colby, Hennessy, and Zakel. Special teams, the specialists are set, right? Jake Moody's your kicker, Thomas Morstead's your punter, John Weeks is your long snapper. The D-line spot is really interesting. They're probably going to go with 10 defensive linemen. So which 10 defensive linemen do you go with is the question. Who is your 10th defensive lineman? So, okay, just looking at their D-line as it pans out, you have Nick Bosa. I mean, these are just, usually you go five ends, 5 tackles, right? 5 defensive ends, 5 defensive tackles. So your 5 defensive ends, I think, are easy. It's Nick Bosa, Mikael Williams, Bryce Huff, Sam Aquinu, and I'm going with Trevis Gibson over Beal, over Jalen Allen, over Yatir Gross-Matos, over William Bradley King, over Damone, over all those guys. So I think Trevis Gibson is definitely NFL. So I got Gibson and Aquinu, and then I've got Huff, McKell, and Bosa. So those are your 5 defensive ends. Who are the 5 defensive tackles? Well, it's Alfred Collins, Kalia Davis, CJ West, Evan Anderson. I think those 4 are going to be on the roster for sure. So really, to me, this last defensive line spot comes down to Jordan Elliott, the veteran, or Seabass, the rookie. And Seabass looked great in the drills, looked great in the first preseason game, didn't look very good in this last game, got engulfed, didn't get a lot done. That's it. It's he, to me, he took kind of a little bit of a step back. There's also Bruce Hector, and Bruce Hector is a favorite of Salah's because he had him in New York, and he's guy's got a great motor. There's no question. He's got a tremendous motor. There's also Shaquille Brown, who they just signed, but I think it's really going to come down to not Hector, not Shaquille Brown, but Jordan Elliott against Sebastian Valdez, and I'm going with Valdez. Now, if there's an injury here, like if West's knee or Mikael Williams' knee, maybe you can keep them both. Maybe you can keep Elliott and Valdez, but if it came down to Elliott or Valdez, I'm going with Valdez. It's a young team. I want a pass rusher there. This guy's a pass rusher. I love the motor, so I'm going with Sebastian Valdez. He's my 10th defensive lineman. He's my 5th defensive tackle. All right, now let's move to linebacker. This is another really interesting spot because this is a loaded spot. 49ers are really loaded at linebacker. Fred Warner, D. Winters, Nick Martin, Luke Gifford was signed to be a special teamer, so he's probably going to make it. And then there's Tatum Bethune, who's had a great camp. And some teams go with 5, so that could be it. But I think the Niners are going to go with 6. And they have Curtis Robinson, but I don't think you can have more than one special team linebacker. I really don't on this team. So it's either Gifford or Robinson, and I think it's Gifford. Though Robinson had a tremendous hit in this last game, and I don't think he'd be picked up. I do think they could put him on the practice squad. So Gifford or Robinson, and in this case, we're going with Robinson. So that means if you're going with 6 linebackers, and I am, that means you're choosing in the 6th spot between either Curtis Robinson, Jalen Graham, Chaz Surratt, or Stone Blanton, or outside candidates. And this is where I think the Niners, if I were them, I would go with outside candidates. I like Stone Blanton. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a nice little practice squad linebacker who could be something. I like Chaz Surratt, developmental guy, used to be a quarterback. I've done some good things. To me, he's practice squad. Jalen Graham didn't have the kind of preseason that he needed to have. And Curtis Robinson is coming off a major knee injury, major torn ACL. He looked healthy in that game. I think he's an easy stash on the practice squad. The 2 linebackers that I loved in the draft, and they are absolutely kicking ass in their location right now, are Chandler Martin from Memphis, who went to Baltimore, and Eugene Asante, who played at Auburn, who went to Miami. Now, Asante, I love them both. I mean, if I could sign both these guys, I probably would. Just because they're both like Nick Martin. They're fast and they're aggressive. They're undersized, but they're hitters. They're future starters. This was a great draft for undersized linebackers. Nick Martin was one, but Eugene Asante and Chandler Martin are right there with him. They are really impressive. And I would go with Asante. He's had a very nice summer. He may wind up making Miami's roster, and if he does, he won't be there. But whoever's available on the waiver wire between those two guys, Eugene Asante and Chandler Martin, I would choose over Stone Blanton, Chaz Surratt, Jalen Graham, and Curtis Robinson. And so I would make that guy, either Eugene Asante or Chandler Martin, my sixth linebacker. And I'd put Stone Blanton and Surratt and Robinson, if I could, of all three of them or two of the three, I'd put them on the practice squad. You know, Blanton needs to build up his body, build up his athleticism. Surratt's a developmental guy. Robinson's a special teamer. They're made for the practice squad. Eugene Asante could start. Chandler Martin could start. These guys are big time talents. And if you look at their production in the preseason, all these guys do is show up and make tackles. I think each guy has had like 5 or 6 tackles in the first 2 games. And the people in Miami, I got a buddy in Miami, he said Asante has been terrific. They're really trying to find a way to get him onto their active roster. But they have a numbers crunch like everybody else, and there's a chance they're going to try to squeeze him through to the practice squad. And if I were the 49ers, I would not allow that. I would absolutely pluck those guys off the waiver wire and put them on your active roster. You know, it's nice to have Nick Martin. It would be really nice to have 2 of them. You know, he's a fast, rangy, violent linebackers who can play from scrimmage are more valuable than Curtis Robinson, a special teamer, or Chaz Surratt or Stone Blanton, developmental guys. So that's who I'm picking up. I'm hunting the waiver wire for Eugene Asante or Chandler Martin. And if either of them are available, I'm plucking them and I'm putting them on my team. And if it was up to me, I probably would cut Gifford and sign them both, because I really believe in their future. And I don't, but you got to have a special teams linebacker. It's important. And so it's Gifford or Robinson. In this case, I think it's going to be Gifford. So there you go. I'm going outside the organization for a linebacker in Eugene Asante. All right, let's move to safety. I'm going 4 safeties, 6 corners. Okay, you need 10 DBs typically. Some teams go 5 and 5. I'm going 4 safeties, 6 corners. My 4 safeties, obviously Malik Mustafa starts hurt, so he doesn't count. But Jason Pinnock, Jair Brown, and Marquise Siegel. Those are my safeties 1, 2, and 3. And the 4th safety job is down between Richie Grant, Jalen Mahoney, Derek Canteen, or Saron Neal. And I think I'd give it to Saron Neal. Saron Neal's guaranteed $2.25 million. He's considered to be a special teams ace. I like Canteen. Don't get me wrong. I like Richie Grant. I like Mahoney. They would be decent practice squad players for sure. But Grant hasn't had the kind of production this summer that I thought. Mahoney looks decent, but not great. Canteen's probably looked the best of the 3. But I still think he's a practice squad guy. He's an undrafted guy who I think can slip through to the practice squad. And Saron Neal is a special teamer. He's a core special teamer. So like last year, you had 3 safeties and then a core special teamer in George Odom. I would go with the same thing, 3 safeties, Pinnock, Brown, and Siegel, with Saron Neal getting that 4th safety spot as the core special teamer. And then the last spot, the last decision, and that is I'm going with 6 corners. Now, I know who 5 of them are. It's Demo Lenore, Renardo Green, Upton Stout, Dallas Flowers, Jacob Robinson. The rookie from BYU is too fast. He's been too good. The coverage has been too solid. He runs in the 4.3s. He had 11 career interceptions. He's looked great all summer. He really hasn't had too many mistakes all summer. He's showing up around the football. So I'm going to put, and Flowers has been a revelation. He's a return man, but he's healthy now. He was in Indy with Gus Bradley. He looks really, really good. So I would say Lenore, Renardo, Stout, Flowers, Jacob Robinson. Now the fans want Chase Lucas. There's also this last call is going to be a really tough call because you got 3 really decent candidates. You got the upside potential of Darrell Luter, who I get it. He's played some soft coverage. He's allowed too many receptions this summer in front of him. He's been on the team a couple years now. You don't get forever in the NFL to establish yourself. It was a now or never summer for Luter, and there are many people that would watch this summer and say, you know what, I can see the athleticism and the long arms and the size, but you know what, the coverage is too loose. He hasn't made enough plays on the football. Period. He gets cut. But other people might look at that and say, you know what, who's got the best man-to-man coverage ability between Luter, Lucas, and Brown? It's probably Luter. So the thing about Luter is if you cut Luter, he's for sure going to get snapped up. If you cut Trey Brown, I think he's probably get for sure snapped up just because he's proven that he's a veteran corner who can play in this league. And then you have Chase Lucas, who has had a phenomenal summer, making big plays left and right. So this one's a tough call. Some people would say, oh, no, it isn't. Go with Chase Lucas. But you really do need to go with the best cover guys. So, I mean, I could go with any of the three guys and be happy. I mean, the conservative pick would be go with Trey Brown. He's got the most experience on the corner. He's versatile. He's played in the most games. He's the guy that's going to probably help you the most in the first month of the year. He's less of a risk than Luter, but more of a coverage guy than Lucas. And I can see them being very conservative and going with Trey Brown as the sixth corner. They also guaranteed Trey Brown $500,000. So they're paying him $500,000 whether he's on the team or not. And I'm not saying that's not enough money to get you on the team, but it is something, and they don't want to waste Jed's cash. So my guess is they probably, it's like, I want Luter. You guys all want Lucas. And I think they're going to go with Trey Brown instead and cut Luter and Lucas. Luter is going to get picked up off waivers. Lucas is not going to get picked up off waivers. Lucas is going to wind up on the practice squad. So that's the way I think it's going to go down. Lenore, Green, Stout, Flowers, Jacob Robinson, and Trey Brown, with Luter getting cut and Lucas getting cut and Luter getting claimed and Lucas going unclaimed and Lucas winding up on the practice squad. So there you go. There is the 53-man roster. We went with 6 corners, 4 safeties, 6 linebackers. Let's see. So 6 linebackers. We went with 10 D linemen, 3 specialists, 9 offensive linemen, and 6 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 5 running backs, and 2 quarterbacks. So there you go. Leave your comments below. Everybody's got a different way of looking at this. The real complex part of this is going to be running back, with Jordan James and Corey Kiner's injuries. And then also, do the Niners look outside? Do the Niners look outside for other options at a couple of these positions? Linebacker, there's going to be some decent options there. Receiver, there's going to be some decent options there. Running back, there's going to be some options there. So if I could get Romeo Doubs, I would in a trade. I'd be very interested in Elijah Badger, Malachi Corley. Running back wise, Elijah Mitchell and Frank Gore are 2 guys that I absolutely would keep my eye on. And then one last thought on this. You say, there always could be trades. I talked about the possibility of trading for a player like a Romeo Doubs. But there's also a chance that the Niners have a few players here that other teams may want. I think there are 4 that really come to mind. Spencer Burford. There's such a dearth of good offensive linemen that a guy like Burford, who's got ideal body type, arm length, he's not old, he's not hurt. Somebody's going to look at Spencer Burford and say, I can develop that guy. So I could see somebody trading for Burford. I could see the Niners coming right down to it and saying, you know what, we really want to put Chase Lucas on the roster. You know what, somebody's willing to give us a 7th round pick for Trey Brown. I think that's possible. Jordan Elliott, if they decide they want to go with Sebastian Valdez over Jordan Elliott, they may be able to find somebody to give them a 6th or 7th round pick in next year's draft for Jordan Elliott. And the 4th guy is Jacob Cowing. Cowing hasn't fulfilled his potential. He hasn't been healthy. But you know what? Somebody could have had a really good grade on him. He was a very productive player at UTEP, very productive player at Arizona. Niners took him in the 4th round. He still runs in the 4.3s. He's gotten a little stronger. I think most people realize Jacob Cowing probably going to play his best football going forward. But if they prefer a different receiver or a more versatile receiver or a bigger receiver, or if they feel like they have their go pattern guy in Jordan Watkins, and maybe they keep a Robbie Chosen and he runs in the 4.3s, and they say, we don't really need Jacob Cowing. I could see them trading Jacob Cowing, Jordan Elliott, Trey Brown, or Spencer Burford for 2026 day 3 draft choices if there's a team out there that potentially has a need and wants that particular player. I think it's possible for sure. All right, there you go. There is the roster breakdown, 53 men. It's a very complicated thing. It's a moving target. It evolves every day, but there's my best shot at it. I hope I gave you some ideas that you can chew on. Once again, this is not going to be an easy roster to pare down at running back, at corner, on the D line, at receiver, on the O line. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be really easy in a couple spots, but it's going to be very difficult in a couple other spots. And all I would say is that in past years, the Niners were like, all the good players are in this camp. We don't have to worry about Baltimore's camp, Miami's camp, Tampa's camp. This year, that's probably not the case. There probably are going to be guys around the league that are a little bit better than the players that you have in your camp. And to me, linebacker, absolutely screams out. I mean, if Baltimore cuts Chandler Martin and Miami cuts Eugene Asante, there's no doubt in my mind that those two guys are better than Curtis Robinson, Jalen Graham, Stone Blanton, Chaz Surratt. They're just better. They're younger, faster, healthier, and better. So, those would be two guys that I would absolutely be looking for. I'm looking at the receiver options. I'm definitely going to take a look at Elijah Mitchell and Frank Gore Jr. if they get cut loose. But there you go. My 53-man roster breakdown with a little bit of the position battles mixed in there. And there's going to be a bunch. I've got 8 position battles. The 6th corner, the 4th safety, the 6th linebacker, the 10th D lineman, the 9th O lineman. These are just some of the battles. Who's going to be the 6th linebacker? Who's going to be the 4th safety? Who's going to be the 6th corner? These are all important decisions as we get right down to August the 26th. All right. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Sharp Corners, Sports Cards and Collectibles, and Claw Daddy Arcades for sponsoring this video. Their links are in the description for all of our sponsors. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube,